Hsien Yang, the youngest son of Singapore's founding Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew, has voiced strong criticism of the Singaporean government, alleging increased repression and corruption since his father's death in 2015. Now residing in the United Kingdom, where he and his wife Lee Suet Fern have been granted political asylum, LHY claims he fled his homeland due to a targeted campaign by authorities to silence him. Speaking with the Associated Press in London, he described Singapore as a country where laws have been weaponized against dissenting voices, asserting that he is one of several Singaporeans seeking protection abroad. In the interview, LHY criticized his estranged brother, former Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong, claiming that legal measures under his brother's government have escalated, leading to increased restrictions on freedoms of assembly and speech. According to LHY, recent laws have sharply curtailed citizens' rights, contributing to a rise in the number of Singaporean asylum seekers. UN data shows that by June 2024, 322 Singaporeans had sought asylum, a significant increase from 88 in 2019. LHY attributes this rise to perceived governmental repression and an erosion of civil liberties. Singapore has this veneer that purports to be a sort of affluent, democratic, free country. The veneer is quite thin, LHY said, describing his view of a repressive regime beneath the nation's outward affluence. He accused the government of using defamation suits, financial penalties, and surveillance to target political opponents, including himself and his family. In response to a P's query regarding LHY's claims against the government, Singaporean authorities issued a forceful statement on Thursday, describing his allegations as a personal vendetta that has escalated into a smear campaign against his father, his family, and his country. According to the government, LHY's accusations include assertions in his asylum application that the authorities targeted his family to prevent his son, Lee Sheng-wu, from becoming prime minister should he choose to enter politics, an accusation the government dismisses, citing that Sheng-wu himself has no political ambitions. The government further condemned LHY's characterization of Singapore, claiming that he has misrepresented the situation as part of a campaign against the country's image. LHY's conflict with his brother and the People's Action Party-dominated government has intensified in recent years, particularly after he joined Singapore's opposition party in 2020. He alleges that this act triggered a series of bogus, abusive, and unwarranted actions by Singaporean authorities, including what he described as unfounded criminal proceedings, defamation cases, and heightened surveillance against him and his wife. Authorities have been investigating LHY and his wife, Lee Suet Fern, for allegedly providing false statements and lying under oath during a disciplinary tribunal involving LSF regarding Lee Kuan Yew's last will. This investigation centers on alleged misrepresentation of the role played by LKY's lawyer, Kwa Kim Lee, in preparing the will, a claim that was disproven by a separate disciplinary tribunal concerning KKL, finding her guilty of falsely denying her involvement. LHY was ordered to pay damages to ministers K. Shanmugam and Dr. Vivian Balakrishnan in a recent defamation suit, after allegedly claiming in a Facebook post that they engaged in corrupt practices by renting state-owned properties under favorable terms. LHY paid the damages to prevent his family home from being seized, but maintained that the charges were unfounded and abusive. Authorities prosecuted LHY's son, Lee Sheng-wu, over a private social media post in 2017, claiming it criticized the judiciary. He was fined 15,000 Singapore dollars. Since the dispute, Lee Sheng-wu has not returned to Singapore, fearing further action from the government. The court case is technically over. However, I assess that there's a substantial risk that my uncle, the Prime Minister, would find an excuse to imprison me were I to return to Singapore. He likes to relitigate old disputes, wrote Lee Sheng-wu via an X post in 2022. The roots of the Lee family's dispute reportedly date back to differing views over the fate of their family residence at 38 Oxley Road, following Lee Kuan Yew's passing, with two family members insisting on fulfilling their father's last wishes, even if it meant opposing the Singapore government. LHY maintains that he, as the sole remaining executor of the will, has requested to demolish the house in accordance with his father's wishes, although government officials have opposed the plan. In the AP interview, LHY claims that Singapore's anti-corruption record appears to be eroding. He noted several high-profile financial scandals involving Singaporean financial institutions, including the seizure of assets worth 3 billion Singapore dollars in 2023 as part of an international money laundering investigation. LHY further cited Singapore's connections to Malaysia's 1MDB corruption case and Brazil's Operation Car Wash as examples of what he alleges are declining standards within Singapore's financial institutions. He argued that such cases reflect worsening standards under his brother's administration. However, Singaporean authorities have rebutted LHY's assertions, pointing to the nation's strong anti-corruption record and high international standing on transparency indexes. Officials highlight recent actions, such as the indictment of Hsien, a former cabinet minister, on corruption charges as evidence of the government's commitment to robust anti-corruption measures. However, on the day of the hearing, the charges were downgraded to lesser offences, many of which were only taken into consideration, to which Hsien pleaded guilty. The government also asserts that LHY's family members have benefited from Singapore's economic success and were freely able to engage in politics during the 2020 elections. The government contends that LHY's departure was voluntary, as both he and his wife retain their Singaporean citizenship and, according to officials, remain free to return to Singapore. They have not confirmed if they will face additional legal charges if he returns, or whether they would be allowed to leave the country. LHY declined to speculate on whether he would take on a leadership role within the opposition. Nevertheless, he intends to continue speaking on Singaporean issues and opposing policies he deems repressive. I have no doubt that every time I do so, I risk further attacks from the Singaporean authorities, he stated. Expressing a hope for political reform, he added, I think the day will come when things will change. I hope it will come in my lifetime, and that one day I'll be able to return to my home. Despite ongoing accusations from both sides, the impact of LHY's comments on Singapore's international reputation and the PAP's domestic image remains to be seen. Meanwhile, rights groups such as Human Rights Watch have noted recent governmental actions limiting free speech, particularly through the use of Singapore's Protection from Online Falsehoods and Manipulation Act. Human Rights Watch has criticized the act as a tool for censorship, which Singaporean authorities argue is necessary to prevent misinformation. As of now, the Lee family's feud, once confined largely to familial disagreements and simmering tensions, has reignited and grown into an international debate, particularly after LHY's recent refugee status and his renewed call for the demolition of his father's house. This has raised questions about Singapore's approach to governance, political freedom, and corruption amidst LHY's unfolding claims.